So this presentation is divided into 4 parts. In the first part, I will talk about what neumorphism is, and in the second part, I would give a very brief introduction on how to do JS development in HarmonyOS. And in the third part of this presentation, I will talk about how to create custom components inside HarmonyOS so that you can create your own neumorphism components. And the last part of this presentation will be the hands-on session. So let's talk about what neumorphism is. So neumorphism is basically a design style which allows us to achieve a soft extruded plastic look and almost 3D like styling. Other than neumorphism, there are also other UI libraries in the Android ecosystem which if you have done some development in Android, you must have used. Two of the most popular UI libraries are Material UI and Glass Morphism. So we will see the difference between these libraries one by one. So first of all, what is Material UI? So in Material UI, we basically use solid colors for the UI, and if we want something to like pop up, we use shadows. Whereas in Glass Morphism, we have like a frosted glass look, like you can see in this design, like the ATM card is having an frosted look almost. And now we will move to what neumorphism looks like. So this is how the neumorphism looks like. In this, you can see that it almost looks like if the components are extruding above the surface, and it gives it almost 3D like look. So the library which I developed for HarmonyOS, I basically uh, made a library so that you can use all these components in your designs. So I created some mock-up designs, as you can see. Uh, both of this watch design and this living room design, both of these were created using the library. So now I will tell you how neumorphism works. So achieving neumorphism is relatively easy. In this, we basically use two shadows. First one is having positive values and the second one is having negative values, while the component and the background itself are of same color. So as you can see in this button, we are using two shadows. One is like a lighter color and one is a darker color, and it gives and it gives and it gives it a effect as if it is extruding above the surface. So as you can see on the top and the left corner, we are using a lighter shadow, and on the bottom and the right corner, we are using a darker shadow, while the background and the component have the same color. So if you want to like create your own color schemes, there is a very fantastic website called neumorphism.io. So this is the website. In this website, you can basically pick up any color and it will automatically generate the light shadow and the darker shadow of this color, and you can basically copy these values and paste it in your style files. Like if you are working on web, then you can provide these values in your CSS files. Okay. So now I will talk about the cons of neumorphism. So neumorphism has basically two cons. First of all is that since this design is entirely based on lights and shadows, so there is not much contrast between the component itself and the background. And second is the spacing issue. This issue comes because since every element uses two shadow, therefore the overall space used by the element is much more than that used in like glass morphism or material UI. While having some cons, neumorphism has some of its pros also. First of its pros is that it brings like a very it has a very refreshing UI, which along with very minimalism. And second one is that it can be used in making tactile UIs. So what is a tactile UI? So in tactile UI, we basically use sound effects along with the components so that visually impaired people can click on the elements and they can like feel the element with the sound effect. So it can be used in that. So now I will give a very brief introduction on how to do JS development in HarmonyOS. So HarmonyOS follows a JavaScript based web-like development paradigm, and you can like go to the official documentation and find more about it. But for now, I will give you a very brief introduction. So in JS development, in HarmonyOS, we have a very basic directory structure. At the top, we have the app.js file, which is like the entry point of the application. And then we have a pages folder in which we have all of our pages. And in each page folder itself, it has three files. First one is the .html file. The second one is the .css file. And the third one is the .js file. The HTML file is very much similar to the has a syntax which is very much similar to the HTML file. If you have worked on like libraries like React and worked on JSX, then it is very much similar to JSX. While the index.css file is basically the same as you use in web development, but you can, the beauty of Harmony OS is that you can use like CSS and JSX to create Android applications. So now the third folder one is the common folder in which you store all of your static assets and all of your images and components which you will build. So this is like the HTML structure. So as I was telling before, it is very much similar to the HTML. Like you can see here I have a div container, and inside it I have a image show text, and then I have a PNG which can be like seen in this image of the emulator. And CSS styling is basically exactly the same like you use in web development. Like you can see here I have used inline styling to style the hello world text as red. And you can also do you can also use state inside of your components by using data binding. So in the .js file, there is a data object which basically contains the local state of your like current page, and you can use this state to like pass the values and show it onto your screen. And you can also like use an on-click event to like change the text, as you can see in this screen. So this is the life cycle of the app. So it is if you have worked with React or any other web development library, you can see like first of all in the application lifecycle we have an on create function, and as soon as the application like the application is closed, we can use the on destroy lifecycle to do anything we want. And the page cycle itself contains of various functions which we can use as per needed. So how can we create custom components in HarmonyOS? So basically, if you want like multiple components, like if you want a button of a specific design, but you will be using that same design multiple times inside your application, then you would have to like write the code again and again. So basically custom components gives us the functionality to create the component just once and then use that component again and again wherever we want in our design. So it is basically like a blueprint or a template. So this is how we can create a custom component. So first of all, we will like create a simple component, and then we would import it inside our main index file by using the element tag. We can name the component whatever we want. Like in this instance, we have named it comp, and then as you can see, we have used the comp twice. While if we have not used this element tag, then we have to like write the code. Then we have to like write these two very long lines twice, thrice, or even how like it would make the code look ugly. So that's all. So let's now move on to the hands-on session. In this session, I will show you how to create Neumorphism components in HarmonyOS. So let me share my screen. 1 minute. Okay. So now let's move on to the hands-on part of this presentation. In this part of the presentation, I will show you how to create Neumorphism components using HarmonyOS. So first of all, we will open the IDE and then create a new project by going to File, New, and then New Project. From here, we can select the empty ability and then click on Next. We will give the project name something like Neumorphism, and then we will select the project type as application, and then we will select the language as JS and the SDK as SDK API version 6. For now, I will not click on the finish button because I have already created one project. I have done this because the Gradle takes some time to compile all those files, and to skip the compilation process, I have already created a project by the name of Applib Neumorphism. As you can see, inside of this project, we have the entry directory, inside which we have the source directory, and then the main directory, and then there is the JS directory. As I have already told you in the previous part of the presentation, this JS directory contains of the common subfolder which contains all of our static images and assets, and then there is the pages folder. This pages folder consists of all of our pages in our application. These pages have their own directory, inside of which they have their CSS, HTML and JS files. And at last we have the app.js file, which is the entry point of this application. So now let's just edit this index file and create our components. So first of all, I will delete all the boilerplate code and then create our components. So as I have already told you, the HTML syntax is very much similar to the HTML syntax. So if you already know HTML, then you will understand it very easily. So for the top level, we will create a container div, inside of which we will have our two components. So I will be making two components. The first one will be the button component, and then the second one will be the card component. So for the button component, we will have two containers because as I have already told you, we need two shadows to create Neumorphism components. So the outer container will contain the darker shadow and the inner container will contain the lighter shadow. So let's just name this outer container, and inside this we will create a button inner container. Inside of this we will have a button with the text of click me. So before moving on to the styling part of this button, let's just preview this. So as you can see, the button is here, but it is very small and it is at the top left corner of the screen. So first of all, let's just center this first of all. So we would center this by making the outer container of it the height 100% so that it spans the full screen of the device, and then we will center this by adding a display of flex, and then align items center, and then justify content as center as well. So as you can see, now the button is centered. So now, before moving on to the styling the button itself, I would like to give this a background. So for the background, I would go to the neumorphism.io website and copy the background color from here. And now we will move to the styling part of the button. So for styling the button, first we will style the outer container. First we will copy this outer container class. Then we will copy this inner container class. So for the as I have already told you, the outer container will contain the darker version of the shadow, which is this one. And for the inner one, we will have the darker version of the shadow. Sorry, the lighter version of the shadow. So as you can see, there is no effect on the screen because we are not given this a height and width. So let's just give it a width of 300 pixels and a height of 100 pixels. So as you can see, we have got our darker shadow. Now we want our inner lighter shadow. For that we will give this a width of 100% and a height of 100% as well, because it will span the whole width of the outer container. That's right. So as you can see, we have our neumorphism component, but the button is still not centered, so we have to center this by doing this. And as you can see, now the button is centered. So the next part is styling the button itself. As you can see, the button is quite small here and it has a different background color, so we have to change the styling on this button. So first of all, I will make the background color similar as the main background, and then I will give a width of 100% and a height of 100% as well. And as you can see, the button styling has changed. So for the font, let's just give this a font. Let's just give this a text color of black, and we can also increase the font size by 30 pixels. So as you can see, we have a button here. So now what we can do is give this some border radius. So let's just give this a border radius of, sorry, we need to give this one a border radius. So let's just give this a border radius of around 15 pixels, and similarly we will also give this border radius of 15 pixels. And as you can see, now we have a complete neumorphism button. So now let's just create a card component similar to this. So for the card also we will have a card outer container which will contain the light shadow, and then we will have the card inner container which will contain the darker version of the shadow. For now we will give this some text of applet, and then since we need the almost the same kind of styling, we will copy this and then just name this to the card outer component and then the card inner component. So these are side by side, so we need to do a flex direction of column so that these are a little bit apart from each other, and then we need to put this a margin bottom to give this margin bottom of around 30 pixels. So now we have our button and we have our card. Let's just increase the height of this card by 400 pixels. 400 I think is too much. Let's just 300. Okay, so what we can do is now add an image here. So first of all we need to copy the image to the common subdirectory. So I will open this in File Explorer, and since I have already downloaded an image, I would just copy this image and paste it in here. Okay, so now we will give this the source, which will be common slash images slash tab.img. So now we have our image here, but we have these two are side by side, so we need to do is flex direction of column, and we will give this some padding as well. This padding for 10 pixels would be sufficient enough, I think. Okay, so there is a typo here, let me fix it. Okay, so now it looks good enough. So now let's just move to the next part, in which we'll be converting these components into their separate custom components. Because as you can see, if we want to reuse this component, we have to like copy these all 5 lines again and again. But if we want to use it similarly like we use any other tag like the div tag or the image tag, we can also do that by converting it into a custom components of itself. So let's just go to the common directory and create a new directory here by the name of component, and then I will open this in Explorer and copy all the index page files here. We will rename this as conf.css, conf.html, and conf.js, so that we will have the same code here. So we can do one more thing, is that we can like create 2 more folders inside of this. So one will be the for our Neumorphism card, and the second one will be the Neumorphism button, and we would open this in Explorer and then copy the same files here. So for the Neumorphism button, we don't need the CSS for the card, and for the HTML we also don't need the card, and we also don't need the container as well, because we will have a separate container in the index file. So we will also remove the container from here. Okay, so for the name of this part we will also do the same. For this we don't need the button styling, and we don't need the button. Okay, so this looks good. So now what we have to do is just import these custom components in the index.html. So we would do that by creating an element with the source of slash components slash new button dot new button slash com dot html, and then we will give this a name of new button. Okay. So similarly we will also import the name of this card as well, and give this a name of this card as well. So after the import we can use this directly by just so as you can see we have imported the components and converted them to their own tags, and we can just use this tag anywhere. We will have our component there, as you can see there. So one more thing we can do is pass props to these components, which we can use inside our components as well. So I would pass it a prop of, let's just give this prop of new button, and then we can use this top inside of our new button customer component by doing this. This is very much similar. If you have worked with React, this is very much similar to the JSS syntax, in which we pass the properties to the components. And similarly, you can see whatever we pass to this goes to the custom component. Like if we give this a name of hello world, it would be there. So what if you don't want to pass props and instead pass whole components inside of this? Like if you want to pass multiple components like text of hello, and then you also want to pass image, which is image, then you can pass this with the help of slots. So how to use slots? It is very simple. Just pass the components inside the custom component tag, and then just use the slot tag here, and whatever you pass through this new Neumorphism card, it will be present there. So this is how you can create custom components inside of Harmony OS. You can create other components as well instead of just Neumorphism components. For example, you can create class morphism components also, and even create a library for class morphism as well if you want. You can always refer to the documentation if you want any kind of guidance, or if you are stuck anywhere. So that's all for this presentation. Thank you.